independent audit and presentation of the data from the team that audits North Lanarkshire. And I think it would be fair to say that it is an extremely positive set of results and Commission findings, reflecting incredibly well on the Council, its elected members, its communities and, I say, its achievements. So, commend the report to members. I know you've seen it back in January in terms of when it was formally published back on the 15th. This now details the action plan, and happy to take any questions as our officers in the room today. Thank you.
Thanks, Des. Any questions? Councillor Crichton.
Don't know whether that's working. It is. Thank you. Yeah, it's relating to point 58 in the report, please. And firstly, before I ask the question, just to acknowledge and thank Andrew McPherson for his help and time in trying to answer previous questions that I posed around this topic. Equally, sadly, I've got to note the Council leader's refusal to meet with me or even answer emails that I'd sent to him recently. So, I suppose the question really is for the Chief Exec, is that given in the report that it's evidenced that not all the required information was available to make the decision to make these pension exit payments, and that the authorisation to pay approximately £1 million of public money to benefit 2 voluntary early retirement packages back in March 2025, I just try to understand the justification of that. If you don't have the relevant and full information, then how can we spend that amount of public money?
Yes.
Thank you, Provost. So, firstly, I don't concur. You'd be surprised to hear, Councillor Crichton, with your wording there in relation to what the report actually states. It confirms that the process that the Council had approved was followed in its entirety, but there is also scope for further improvement moving forward, and that action is detailed within the action plan that I referenced and under Appendix 2. I also don't recognise that the figures that you're quoting, and I'm not going into the detail of that today, but again, those figures are often based upon assumptions, based upon a historical kind of period in time, and obviously reflect upon people's pension contributions or otherwise. So often when it comes to chief officers, those figures look quite extensive, understandably, because they have the highest paid officers other than the Deputy Chief Executive and Chief Executive of the Council, but they also reflect in many cases a 40-year contribution, or near on a 40-year contribution to a pension scheme. And therefore the policies that apply to them in the consideration of their nomination for potential voluntary redundancy are the same process, procedures and policies that apply to any member of staff. So I don't know if we'll perhaps bring in Councillor Greg Telfer to add any detail to that, or indeed Francis in terms of audit. But these matters have already been considered fully through audit and scrutiny, independently, and I say have been reported through Audit Scotland. Thank you.
Greg.
Yep, thanks Provost and thanks Des. So concur with Des there that the report that was presented by Audit Scotland to the Audit and Scrutiny panel last September reiterated that there was no concerns that policies hadn't been followed. It was simply, or not simply, but it was a case of the paperwork not necessarily being as complete as it could be. And following discussions with officers around the decision-making process, the auditors were comforted that the alternatives had been considered. It was simply that the paperwork hadn't been completed. And in terms of the assessment for value for money, we had the extensive conversations with the external audit team just around the rationale and the approach that was being taken. And I've got to remember that these exit packages and the right to request to leave under efficiencies of the service are a contractual right, and that's something that every employee within the Council has. And that was the approach that was taken in accordance with the policies that had been agreed by Council at the appropriate time. More than happy to leave that there. Don't know if Francis is getting to...
Francis, can I ask you to add?
Thank you, Chair. Audit Scotland presented their annual audit report to the Scrutiny panel in September last year. And in relation to the senior officer exit payments, the report confirmed that the retireals of the 2 chief officers were processed in accordance with the scheme, pension scheme, and with appropriate authorisation from the Chief Executive. The retireals were processed in line with the Council's scheme of delegation, and the applications for retiral were considered by a subgroup of the Workforce Change Steering Group, comprising senior officers who were independent of the applicants. So Audit Scotland therefore concluded that decisions have been taken appropriately, independently and in accordance with established procedures, and on that basis, in my opinion, there was no justification to do any further work on that. I brought a paper to Audit and Scrutiny in November, sharing a letter from the Deputy Chair of the Accounts Commission, and that letter required all councils to recognise the important lessons from the well-publicised issues around senior officer exit payments at Glasgow City Council. This included the inclusion of elected member scrutiny and oversight for future senior officer exit payments. This requirement will be picked up as part of the ongoing review of the Council's governance processes, which was approved by the Policy and Strategy in September last year.
Thanks. Councillor Crichton, do you wish a supplementary?
Yes, please, Provost. Thank you very much. Can I just quote, because I, as you can imagine, totally disagree with the basis that's been put forward. The report stated that there was no clear method of alternative options to voluntary early retirements proven. It didn't prove feasibility of these options that was there, and it did not prove better value for the public purse. In terms of business efficiency, I think it was Greg that mentioned that. Business efficiency carries with it the obligation that there has to be a robust business case put in place. And the robust business case in terms of financial aspects is that it has to be proven that the public purse has been spent correctly, and that the money that has been spent on pension strain costs and the additional costs that's there have a means of recouping it, usually in a period of 2 to 3 years. There is no means that the Council can recoup this £1 million. The £1 million comes from the pension strain costs, the additional compensatory benefit costs, the lump sum cost that's attaching to that, and also the additional annual income that has been paid to these individuals. In terms of whether they qualified under the business efficiency test, no, they didn't. The other question that I would like to ask is that both individuals that's there, and even if it was on the basis that officers were minded to enhance these benefits, and let's remember it is an enhancement, this isn't an entitlement. The entitlement finishes before any enhanced benefits. So we're talking about enhancements, we're not talking about the right to have your pension benefits based on accrual. This is totally different from that. So when you're looking at that basis, and even if you were minded to gift these enhancements, is that the pension rule of 85, without being technical, should also have applied to both these cases, and in that instance would also have restricted the exposure that this Council had to making such significant pension payments to 2 individuals.
Thank you, Councillor Crichton. I'm going to take exception to the language. Officers were minded, gifted. As has already been detailed, the process was entirely in line with Council policy. It has already been through the full scrutiny process. It's been detailed there in terms of the response from the Section 85 officer and the Chief Officer of Audit. So nothing more to add in that regard in terms of there is learning from it, no doubt about it, and that is why we have responded in terms of the action that follows up. We will seek to further improve the process, but there is nothing more to add in terms of the statements you're making, because I don't fundamentally concur that they reflect accurately what actually happened. Thank you.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure that we're on the basis, sorry, it's not another question, but the language that I used there was professional and it was technical and it was on the basis of pension language. There was nothing aimed at any of the officers, there was nothing spurious about it. It was on the basis of trying to understand why there's a justification of spending £1 million worth of public funds when part of the process has not been met, and it's clearly not been met unless someone can show me the robust business case, which is a requirement for these payments to be met. Sorry.
Yeah, no, just quickly, Councillor Crichton, you used the words, if officers were minded. That inferred that it was officers that made the decision. The decision arose from a committee decision. The implications of that committee decision were done in line with Council's policy and procedures. It's not officers that were minded to do it individually or separately or distinctly because of the grouping or individuals concerned. That is inaccurate. Nor was it gifted. It was in line with the policy and practice of the organisation. There is learning from it and we are taking it forward. I'm not going to respond any further on it. It's been through detailed communications I know with your good self and my Deputy Chief Executive, Section 85 Officer and indeed Chair of Audit under the Scrutiny Panel. Thank you.
Any further questions on this report? Councillor Brennan.
Thanks very much, Provost. It's just that, again, in relation to the pension payments. An element of the pension payments covered some compensatory elements that would come directly on an annual basis from the revenue budget. Can you please explain how it can be in a situation where it's a voluntary retiral situation that any compensatory payments are made at all? I just don't see any reason for that.
That question has already been answered. The consideration and the process was entirely in line with policy and practice of the Council. It was not done an individual or an officer or any independent process. It was done in line with policy and procedure and practice. Thank you.
Councillor Brennan, supplementary.
With respect, Provost, it's not been answered. I've asked the question and you say it's been answered, but it's not been answered. Perhaps the Section 95 officer can answer it now.
Greg, do you wish to respond to Councillor Brennan?
I don't actually have anything further to add from what the Chief Executive's already said. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions on this report? Can we agree to note the report?